Feinstein. This is Conversation in Music. That was a little bit of the Gershwin Concerto in F, which I wanted to play because the person who did the best interpretation of it, in my humble opinion, was Oscar Levant. I want to focus on Oscar Levant's music. If you know the name Oscar Levant at all, you probably know him from seeing old movies on television, or you know some of his witticisms, which have been oft quoted. Worth quoting, certainly. Things like, "I knew Doris Day before she became a virgin," or "Elizabeth Taylor ought to get a divorce and settle down," or when the singer Eddie Fisher left Debbie Reynolds to marry Elizabeth Taylor, he said, "How high could anyone stoop?" Levant was absolutely brilliant, so brilliant that even Groucho Marx would not appear on his local Los Angeles television show, which ran for about 3 years and sadly does not exist anymore except for one program with Fred Astaire and excerpts of a few others. But today being about Levant's music is something that I think he would have liked, because the music was the thing that was most important to Oscar Levant. Please do look him up and discover him, because his recordings of Gershwin and other classical repertoire are magnificent and in some instances definitive. Certainly I feel that they are with the Gershwin, even though they were recorded so long ago that the fidelity is not what it could have been if he had re-recorded them a few years later. But Levant is someone I first discovered because of his books. I think I may have seen him on television in the movie Rhapsody in Blue, which was the all but fictitious story about the life of George Gershwin, in which Oscar played himself. But when I was in junior high school, I discovered that Oscar Levant had written a book. I used to take the bus in Columbus, Ohio, downtown from my home. It was 50 cents, and I always would make sure with the $5 I had that I had 50 cents remaining to take the bus home. And one day I discovered this paperback book, this is the copy, called Oscar Levant, The Unimportance of Being Oscar, which cost me 95 cents. And I was thrilled to find the book because even though I was quite young, I still had heard about Levant and knew about him because he was pretty much a household name, even in the 1960s, long after he had stopped concertizing. He had a number of nervous breakdowns later in his life and tragically stopped playing the piano in 1958, stopped playing professionally then. And the world was deprived of so much more that could have come from him creatively. He died in 1972, August of 1972, at the age of 65. And he was somebody who was so brilliant and very contemporary, in that when you see interviews with him and when you read his books, he was not a product of the 1940s and 50s where everything was sort of whitewashed and glossed over. He was real. His television show was the first reality television show. And these books are filled with amazing anecdotes about his contemporaries and stories that he picked up. I see that I have a piece of paper in here I wrote down some of his quotes. "He'll double cross that bridge when he comes to it." And underneath that, "Marriage is a triumph of habit over hate." I don't know why that seemed important to me to write down when I was in my early teens, but there we are. Oscar Levant's first book was published in 1940. I don't know if you can see because of the glare of that dust jacket. But this book, published in 1940, was a best-selling volume, and it's one of the things that helped establish Levant. And this copy is autographed to Harold Arlen, who was his close friend. Harold Arlen wrote Over the Rainbow and a gazillion other songs. It's ownership signature of Harold Arlen, and it's signed by Oscar. "For Reverend Harold, sensitive, highly talented, greatly successful, and spiritually a great exponent of, quote, our people. Chauvinistically yours, Oscar, May 5th, 1940. Well, Reverend Harold is referring to a song cycle that Arlen wrote called Reverend Johnson's Dream, which was recorded and released around that time. And as far as being spiritually a great exponent of our people, what Levant meant was that Arlen incorporated a lot of the Jewish-sounding modalities into his popular songs, as well as a tremendous use of African-American themes. And Oscar and Harold were such good friends that I have a home recording that I'll have to share with you sometime of Oscar just palling around with Harold, playing the piano and improvising music, and it's spectacular. But this book, Smattering of Ignorance, put Levant on the map. Years after he stopped concertizing, he wrote a second book, which actually was compiled from recorded reminiscences and assembled into this book called The Memoirs of an Amnesiac. That was 1965, and it too became a bestseller. Later was reprinted in this very attractive paperback edition. And then came The Unimportance of Being Oscar, the first of his 3 books that I read. When I was in junior high school, in I guess it was 8th grade, there was a teacher who encouraged me to read all 3 of Levant's books, saying that you don't really get to know what an author is about or who an author is until you've read all of their works. So I read all 3 of his books and then started discovering his recordings. And then I discovered his popular songs, which at first I didn't realize he had been so prolific in writing. Most people don't know that Oscar Levant wrote music, and I eventually was able to collect all of his published songs, even though some of them are still photocopies. So I'd like to show you some of those. Oh, this book, this is a novel called Burlesque. And Burlesque was made into a movie called The Dance of Life, which features Oscar Levant's first appearance in a movie in 1929. So this is connected to Levant. Levant was in the Broadway play Burlesque, which is what it was called when it played on the Great White Way, starring Barbara Stanwyck, and then when it was made into the movie The Dance of Life with Nancy Carroll and Hal Skelly, Oscar was in the film. I'm wondering if there's any photos in here of him. Well, let's take a look. There's an interesting photo from the movie, but it doesn't have a picture of Levant. So, oh, this is interesting. I pulled this out because I thought it would be of interest. Oscar Levant was also very close friends with Irving Berlin, and it was Irving Berlin who published some of his songs back in the days when Levant was a songwriter. And in the 1960s, Irving Berlin put together a privately bound volume of some of his favorite songs to send to his contemporaries and to exploit his catalog. So this was the copy that belonged to Oscar and June Levant, and it is signed to them from Irving Berlin to Oscar and June, for Oscar and June, with love from Irving, 1969. And then it has bound, I believe it's 180 of Irving Berlin's songs, of which it still is about 10% of his output. So these are bound into this volume with gilt-edged pages there. I keep skipping all the covers, all the different attractive covers. And when I used to visit June Levant, whom I met shortly after moving to Los Angeles, we would pull this book out and sing through the various Irving Berlin songs. So it was very sweet of her to later give this book to me. And it's interesting that Berlin chose to include in this book things like I'd Like My Picture Took, which was far from a hit and very, very obscure, but nevertheless, there was something about it he liked enough to include in this volume. I'm Beginning to Miss You, another obscure song, I'm Not Afraid. I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. That's a little bit better known. Fred Astaire sang that with Ginger Rogers in Follow the Fleet. It's a lovely day tomorrow. I've got my love to keep me warm. Anyway, that's the Berlin book. So these are some of the boxes of the Oscar Levant sheet music that I've collected. And it's fun to try and collect the complete works of any songwriter. And it's often very difficult to find copies of sheet music these days because they are an endangered species. And you can often buy a piece of sheet music from Music Notes or some publishing service online where they are computer generated and sent directly to you as PDFs. The problem with those, even though I appreciate them, is that they sometimes have all kinds of typographical errors in them, and we sometimes don't know about the authenticity or correctness of a song unless we go back to the original publications. In the late 1920s, Oscar Levant came to Hollywood and worked for RKO Studios, writing songs for their first musical film, which was called Street Girl. So I have a lot of his early songs from movies from the late 20s. This is from the mid-1930s, written with Edward Heyman, with whom he wrote his most successful song. All My Life is from Leathernecking. So these are all kinds of different editions of his early songs. This came from a collection at RKO Studios. And let's see if we're awake. So this was Oscar Levant's most famous song, and it's called Blame It on My Youth. I'm trying to find a vintage copy of it. Here it is. This is the original publication of Blame It on My Youth. When Oscar would play this at parties later, he would say, "I'm now going to play you a medley of my hit." It features a picture of a man named Joey Nash, who was a popular band singer of the time, who must have sung the song on radio, even though, to my knowledge, there is no recording of Joey Nash singing it. Joey Nash sang with a band called Richard Himber. But anyway, Blame It on My Youth is his most enduring song, and possibly the only song of his that's still available online and in print, even though there was another song that was rather provocative for its time because it was about drugs, about taking drugs. And that was recorded by the Chick Webb Band with Ella Fitzgerald, and that was called Wacky Dust. They call it Wacky Dust. It's something you can trust. So that's Wacky Dust. Also recorded by Blue Baron, and Bunny Berrigan. Bunny Berrigan had what, in many opinions, is the best record, for those of you who care about those things. They call it Wacky Dust. It's from a hot cornet. It gives your feet a feeling so breezy, and oh, it's so easy to get. Well, Wacky Dust was a thinly veiled song, as I said, about drugs. Well, in addition to having about 80 popular songs to his credit, Levant also wrote symphonic music. He wrote a number of symphonic pieces that were played on the radio, including a piano concerto that was premiered in 1942 by the NBC Symphony. But only one of his compositions was commercially printed, and it's a thing called Nocturne, Nocturne for Orchestra. And this one belonged to David Raxon, who is the composer of Laura, of whom I've previously spoken. And at one point, Andre Previn was interested in possibly performing this piece. And there's a note from Ara Guzulimian, who was the music administrator of the LA Phil, written about Andre Previn and the possibility that he might perform something in Levant. It says, "Dear David, Andre's enthusiasm for the Levant seems to be lukewarm at the moment, and so I'm returning this score with our thanks." So the one contemporary performance that this piece might have gotten by Andre Previn in the LA Phil in the early 80s was not to be, unfortunately. There is also a piano sonatina that was composed by Levant that was published in the early 1930s. And there's a rhapsody for piano and orchestra that he wrote for a movie called Romance on the High Seas, but it was cut from the film. And I have a soundtrack recording of it, and it's quite spectacular. It's only about 3.5 minutes long, but it's worthy of being heard. Levant also wrote film music, and these are studio copies of some of his film cues for a movie called Nothing Sacred that some of you may know. It's a delightful film made by Selznick. So these are all little remnants of Oscar Levant's composing life that sadly stopped after around 1942. He just gave it all up. These are all, these are called stock orchestrations. These are things that one could purchase for 75 cents. And then your local big band could play these pieces. Inside are individual parts for all the instruments in a big band. And that's how they help to exploit these different compositions by all the popular song composers of the time. And all of these songs are so obscure. Then Came the Rain. Last Night a Miracle Happened. We've Got the Moon and Sixpence was from a British musical he wrote called Out of the Bottle. And this was a popular song in Britain, but it never did anything over here. But routinely, publishers would print what they called stocks in hopes that they would help to make all of these things popular. As I mentioned, Blame It on My Youth was his most enduring song, but in the late 1920s there was another song that was popular by Levant called Lady Play Your Mandolin, which had lyrics by Irving Caesar, and was ubiquitous in that time. It went, lady play your mandolin, lady let that tune begin. When I hear your song of sin, I'm a sinner too. Senorita, sweet Chiquita, I could eat your heart. Levant used to refer to it as his cannibalism song. This is the original cover of Lady Play Your Mandolin. And it has a picture of Nick Lucas, who made a very popular recording of it. It's quite a cute song. Lyrics by Irving Caesar, who wrote also the lyrics to Swanee and Tea for Two. So that's Lady Play Your Mandolin. One of the last song scores that Levant wrote for a musical film is a movie that starred Ginger Rogers called In Person. And that movie featured 3 songs with music by Oscar Levant and lyrics by Dorothy Fields. And that song that I'm going to show you, Don't Mention Love to Me, still is known by some songwriter aficionados and fans of the work of Dorothy Fields. Oscar Levant was the one to point out that Dorothy Fields often wrote songs with negatives in the title, like Don't Blame Me, or I Can't Give You Anything But Love. It's not where you start, it's where you finish. And this one is an example of that. So I think I'll keep this one out because I'd like to sing that one for you. This is the cover of the sheet music for the British publication of the song. Now, Ginger Rogers made this movie in person when she wanted to temporarily break away from her partnership with Fred Astaire. They were in the midst of making their now iconic musical films together. And she made this one, and it was an immediate failure. It got very bad reviews, and she went back to working with Fred, and they eventually made 10 movies together. This is Oscar Levant's original manuscript in his hand of the verse for Don't Mention Love to Me. And it is the most rudimentary notation. It just says verse, and it has the melody with just rudimentary chords here and simple bass notes. And from that, somebody, probably also listening to Oscar play the piano, took that and, oh, that's coming apart, created more substantial accompaniment. So that's Don't Mention Love to Me. So let's keep this one out. And let me give you a rendering of a few of these songs. Let's move my Levant library over here and see what we got here. There is one thing I know, if I let myself go and our lips should ever touch, I would love you much too much. It is better far to share just a casual affair. So before a kiss is born, I must tell you this to warn you. My heart is not a plaything, party is not a gay thing, darling. Let's be friends on the morrow, darling. Don't mention love to me. I can't like you discreetly. No halfway measures for me. I must love you completely. If this should end, where would I be? You smile, I'm overpowered. I'd fall, but I'm a coward, darling. Don't mention love to me. Darling, don't mention love to me. So that's Don't Mention Love to Me. I think it's a very pretty song. I hope that maybe somebody will hear it and will want to sing it. Well, I'd like to sing you Blame It On My Youth. So let me extract that from this conflagration. Certainly I think I know the song, but a funny thing happens sometimes when there's a camera in your face, you know. So let's pull out this copy. Okay. Wow, it's already taped together. How about that? I recorded this song in 1987 or 86. When I first played the Algonquin Hotel, I sang it there, and I included it, even though now I can really blame it on my youth. This is one of those songs that I think I sang too early back in the day, but anyway, now I don't have to worry about that. You were my adored one, then you became the bored one, and I was like a toy that brought you joy one day, a broken toy that you preferred to throw away. If I expected love when first we kissed, blame it on my youth. If only just for you I did exist, blame it on my youth. I believed in everything, like a child of 3. You meant more than anything, all the world to me. If you were on my mind all night and day, blame it on my youth. If I forgot to eat and sleep and pray, blame it on my youth. If I cried a little bit when first I learned the truth, don't blame it on my heart, blame it on my youth. first I learned the truth. Don't blame it on my heart. Blame it on my youth. For Oscar.